The Exorcism of Emily Rose is a 2005 movie that follows a lawyer who takes on a case involving a priest accused of negligent homicide after performing an exorcism on a young girl. The movie is actually based on a book, The Exorcism of Anneliese Michel. Michel's parents and the two priests who in real life performed her exorcism were prosecuted. Through the prosecution asked that the parents be excused from punishment as they had, quote, suffered enough. This week, the Jackalopes will explore The Exorcism of Emily Rose and Anneliese Michel. I'm Floyd Whiting.
I'm creeped out. I'm with Floyd's mustache.
And I'm possessed.
And we are your Jackalopes. Now, according to IMBD, ultimately the accused in this case were found guilty of manslaughter, resulting from negligence, and the two clergymen were actually sentenced to 6 months in jail, which was later suspended. They also got 3 years of probation. The most significant differences in the movie from the real-life case are that Michel periodically fasted for several months as part of the exorcism, and she did remain on her medication until death. So this says, because I've heard differently.
I've heard very mixed things about this whole thing.
Absolutely, and you know,
and so we're just gonna say what we found.
Yeah.
But I have heard that the medication was stopped.
I heard that it was stopped. I heard that she wouldn't take it.
Yes.
I heard that she is the one who said that the demons wouldn't let her eat. And this is not the movie. This is the real case. And the real case surrounds Anna Elizabeth, or Anneliese Michel. She was born the 21st of September, 1952. And she would ultimately die on the 1st of July in 1976. She was a German woman who underwent 67 Catholic exorcism rites during the year before her death. The cause of death was malnutrition. And they were a very prominent Catholic family. She is said to have actually gone to Mass sometimes twice a week. I do know they hold Mass, I think, every day. Mm-hmm. She was, from various reports and stories that I've heard, she was very religious. She took her religion very seriously. When she was 16, she did experience a seizure. Now, after that seizure, she was taken to the hospital where she was diagnosed with psychosis caused by temporal lobe epilepsy. Mm-hmm. Shortly after, she was diagnosed with depression, and she was actually treated at a psychiatric hospital. But by the time she was 20 years old, and I've seen a lot of different stories on this, I didn't manage to get everything in my homework that I wanted to get, but I'll talk about some things that I did read. She became intolerant of various religious objects. Now, this is a devout Catholic young lady, attending Mass 2 times a week on average, from what we understand. She was a practicing Catholic, and now she won't even go near religious objects.
So she described it as the religious objects shone so bright she couldn't look at them.
She couldn't, yeah. She actually went on a trip with a group, and her tour guide said that she would avoid every cross that they came by. She would literally like give it a wide berth, and that they had kind of noticed this, you know, whether she was trying to hide it or whatever, I don't know. But the tour guide who took these young ladies on this trip said, yeah, she was actively avoiding it. So it wasn't just her mom that said she's avoiding religious, icons. So when she was also 20 years old when she began to hear voices. Now, we do know in today's modern age, voices are associated with various types of mental illness. And these voices, I want people to understand, not that I've ever heard them, but
I have.
The voices in your head.
Yes.
I've got a friend who actually I used to work with, and he was diagnosed, psychotic, and he would tell me, these voices are as real to me as you are.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you can hear them or not is completely irrelevant, because I do. And so as we approach this situation, I think we have to kind of approach it with a bit of sensitivity, because it's not like that's something anyone can control, and it absolutely devastates their lives.
Absolutely.
And I appreciate medication, and would be all for, a loved one taking that medication if anything like that were to happen. But when she started to hear the voices, she was 20 years old. She was on medication. Okay, so she's already being medicated for this, and now the voices are just starting. And despite taking that medication, as the year progressed down the line, everything became worse, which drove her to be wanting to unalive herself. And she started to display other symptoms. And so she took that medication, and they kind of changed it. You'll have to give it a Goog to see what medication she was on. And bear in mind, medication's come a long way since then. But she took various kinds, and they would switch it on her. And I know sometimes that doesn't really pan out well.
Worse in a lot
it
of
can.
cases.
It can make it worse.
And I mean, even with seizure medication, obviously, I only know this from my experience with dogs who have epilepsy, because that's what I worked with before. But sometimes it's very difficult to find the right mixture of medication to help with that.
You almost got to sit there and just trial and error.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
And people got to bear in mind, until you take something, sometimes they don't know if it's going to react with something else that you're taking.
Right.
If you happen to be on a couple different ones, that's why pharmacists are so important, and pharmacy should be taken quite seriously. Razor, a friend of mine who I served with, he would eventually become a pharmacist, and boy, he does not play around when it talks to, even just joking around about drug talk. He's very serious about it, because you could be taking this, and then your doctor prescribes this, and he's got to stop it.
Because it interferes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's going to thin your blood too much, or that's going to do this. And so it takes a team. After taking psychiatric medications for 5 years that actually failed to improve her symptoms, she and her family became convinced this is a demonic possession. As a result, her family, devout Catholics, appealed to the Catholic Church for an exorcism. Now, I know there's some people out there who may be, saying, poo-pooing the exorcism thing, but you got to realize exorcism has been with us since the dawn of civilization. Now, we've managed to actually kind of come along and say, hey, that's because of this type of psychosis or type, mental illness. But devout individuals believe that this is a very real thing. And it's not taken very lightly by the church. It's not like they go, oh, you guys want an exorcism? I'm going to send somebody out there.
Right.
That's not what happens.
Yeah.
Because they were actually rejected. The church is like, no, that's not something that we're going to do.
I think they were rejected twice for it.
Yeah. 2 priests actually ended up finally getting permission in 1975.
It wouldn't bode well if you were denied 3 times.
Right.
Right. Yes.
Yeah, right. Now, the priests then began performing exorcism, and when they did, the family stopped all talks with doctors. They decided we're gonna. And look, if your baby girl is going through this stuff and all modern science isn't working, what do we do?
Yeah, you do whatever you can.
You do whatever you can, right? So these people did what they thought was right. And that's one thing that I want people to realize as we go into this story. Now, she stopped eating food and died of malnourishment and dehydration after 67 exorcism sessions.
Which were lengthy.
It's not like they show up, give the old Dominus Omus, and walk out.
Mhm.
This is a long process. A lot of things were recorded. A lot of things transpired. Yeah, and it gets to Aaron. Yeah, this gets to Aaron. Her mother actually said that she noticed stigmata.
Mm-hmm.
Now, stigmata, for those who don't know, is the spontaneous arrival of holes in the hands, the middle of the hands, and the feet, and is actually a sign. A lot of Catholic saints go through stigmata.
Mm-hmm.
It's a sign that you've been touched by God. Okay, so a lot of people might be out there saying, well, this woman's possessed. Why would she be touched by God? Eventually, it would come forth that Anneliese, saw and would speak with Jesus, or excuse me, not Jesus, the Holy Mother Mary.
Mm-hmm.
And that Mary, and this is something that was included, I think, in the book. I haven't read the book, but I've seen that movie, that, hey, you were chosen for this.
And basically, you were made to suffer for the sins of the youth from the time. That's what I read.
And there you go.
So she was protecting everyone by suffering herself.
Well, and as it goes, the Virgin Mary said, you can choose heaven right now.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, no, I'll go back and suffer. And then after that, developed the stigmata.
Yeah. And so touched by God. And chose to, I guess, bear this weight. Now, she suffered. When she died, she weighed only 66 pounds. And that's, my God, that's a skeleton wrapped in skin, And again, we've heard various different things, that she said the demons wouldn't allow her to eat. Other people say, well, she just didn't eat. But that is so hard to try and explain to people. When your body is eating itself from hunger, your brain has a switch where food is the only thing that you are thinking about. Now, on more than one occasion, people did witness her eating bugs and spiders in the room. That first off, that just apparently would be in the room with her, and she would consume these things. But she also suffered broken knees from continuous genuflections, which I had to look this word up. We don't
I
use
also
it very
did
often.
have to look it up. I was
We
like,
don't
what
use
does
it.
this mean?
If you were Catholic at some point,
Right.
Yeah, and essentially this means
there's a lot of genuflecting.
Genuflecting, yes.
Yeah.
It means prayer,
Mm-hmm.
hitting the knees on the floor and praying. Both of her knees were broken from this. There was also reports of strength that seemed to come out of nowhere.
Just superhuman.
For some, and think about it. She's 66 pounds when she passed away. So let's add a couple weeks on to, or reduce that, or not reduce it, but take back some of the time, add some weight. 86 pounds. It's 20 pounds. It's quite a bit. And you're still able to throw your sister across the room like you're nothing, or like she's light as a feather.
Yep.
My God. That's unnatural. And more than one person came forward and said, this is what we saw. She was able to do these things when she weighed next to nothing for no reason.
I want to know how much the sister weighed. Like, I think that would help me out a lot. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
So when she passed away, the state had to do something. And so they did. They held a court case. And as we said before, the prosecution, by the time it was all done, basically said, look, we got to convict these people of this. But when you start handing out punishments, let's be as lenient as possible. And so when they were sentenced, 6 months in jail, 3 years of probation, but the jail time was suspended.
Yeah, it was time served.
Yeah, so you're done. Basically, yes, you're convicted of this. Okay, but you're not going to do any time for it.
Which, interestingly, they never went for an appeal on that either. They were like, okay.
Yep, we'll take
it.
Yep. Yeah, I think everyone, by the conclusion of this case, had been through so much for so long that I think, and I can't speak for the parents. I don't know these people, but I think it didn't even really matter at that point.
Right.
They're like, whatever. Whatever you guys are going to do to us, do to us. We were there. We know our truth. And if you don't want to believe it, that's fine. But exorcisms are a touchy subject because it deals with religion. And that's something that we aren't big on speaking about here, just because I don't want to offend anyone of any religion. In my opinion, even though I don't really hold on to one, I can respect its use.
And value in people's lives.
Absolutely. And the value in people's lives. And I've got a lot of issues with a lot of different churches, but that's the churches. It's not all of its believers. And I'll say all because I've got some issues with the believers. But I'll switch this over because we tried to get some of the history of exorcisms. How long have we been trying to pull demons and spirits out of people, Aaron?
I can tell you.
Let me know, brother.
So we've been doing this. Ancient Babylonians, their priests perform exorcisms on like carved stone, carved wooden dolls, almost like voodoo dolls in a way, where they would, use that to exorcise the person. Ancient Persians were saved from demonic possessions via holy water. And then, of course, the Bible recounts many times when Jesus cast out. The most famous story is Legion, right?
Yeah.
The multitude of demons that was possessing this guy, put him into a herd of pigs, and they threw themselves into the water and died because they were so fearful that they were going to be cast out of the world. But honestly, when Floyd said that this was a topic that we were covering, I literally almost threw up in my mouth because this thing, when we even mention it, I get goosebumps. Because if you have not seen the movie, you have to see the movie. It was more impactful on me than The Exorcist. And to this day, in the middle of the night, if I wake up, I will not look at a clock. So I told the better Aaron early on, I said, no clocks in the bedroom, ever. And especially like the glowing digital clock.
Yeah, the one.
I'm like, ain't happening. This movie gave me time PTSD. Like, seriously. And then, what was it, 2008?
2005, if I remember right.
Okay, so it's been like a hot couple decades.
It's a 2005 movie, brother.
Yeah.
So for those that don't know, her possessions would always take place at like 3 a.m. That's why I will not look at the clock. The hour between 3 and 4 a.m. is known as the witching hour or the devil's hour, because this is the hour in which the veil between life and death is its thinnest, making it easier for crossover between the non-living and living, or demons and us, or whatever. And the pinnacle of it is said to occur at 3 a.m. A lot of Christians believe that this stems from the devil mocking God.
The Holy Trinity.
The Holy Trinity, because it's a belief that Jesus died on the cross at 3 p.m., and because the devil works in inverse of that, 3 a.m. is when the devil is the most active. So she's possessed like the demons come out at 3 a.m. I'm not looking at the clock because I don't want to see 3 a.m. because there's been enough other weird crap. Go back and watch some of those. Some people speculate that it's because that's the kind of pinnacle time, 3 to 4, when you're in REM sleep, and if you wake up, you can suffer sleep paralysis, shadow people.
Yep.
On and on.
I suffered sleep paralysis the majority of my life.
The crazy part, though, is I had an occasion in the late 90s to have dinner with Father James Labar. For people that are not familiar with who he is, he passed in, I think, 2007 or 8. He was a renowned Roman Catholic priest who was the chief exorcist for the Archdiocese of New York in the United States. So me being me,
right? Yeah,
all kinds of questions.
I mean, well, these exorcists are also demonologists. I mean, they know.
Yeah.
They're the warriors on the front line here.
I mean, he was the expert in this. I mean, it's like anything. You want rocket science, you want whatever. He's the expert in exorcisms and demoniology, I guess you would call it. He had said, this was in a prior interview with like Spirit Daily magazine or something, that The Exorcist was the most accurate representation of an exorcism that he had ever seen on film.
The actual practice itself and steps.
All of it was as accurate as had ever been depicted. He was actually even on set at one point. So I had lots of questions for him. I said, have you ever seen someone levitate? And he said, not during an exorcism.
When?
What does that mean?
Tell me when.
So there was an occasion where there was a parishioner that had stayed after church that he had kind of noticed had been a little off. And as he was coming back through or whatever, they rose up out of the pew and levitated for what seemed like several minutes.
Wow.
So even though it wasn't during an exorcism, he had witnessed levitation. So there was another story. I said, what's one of the crazier ones? And I don't remember because it was a long time ago if it was in Portugal or if it was here, but essentially they had, this girl was possessed. They locked her in a bathroom, but it's like old building, like the story, it's like 20 foot tall to the ceiling or whatever. And there was just the toilet and a sink in there. And the people, before the priests got there, said that they could hear through the door in this like creepy demonic voice. She was like, I'm getting taller. I'm like raising up. I'm doing all this stuff, whatever. Horrific, hellacious crash. She had tore the chandelier off the ceiling. You would need a ladder to get to this thing. And so they got there and exorcised her and she was okay. Then I had asked him, because you always hear about like tongues and things like that.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, he said, there would be people that, not necessarily incredibly well-educated people that would be speaking in perfect Aramaic. And you're like, where does that come from?
Yeah.
I mean, is that just, synapses misfiring? But how is it perfect?
Yeah.
So,
Anneliese, there was reports that she spoke like Latin
right,
quite well all of a sudden. So,
and it's just one of those things where you're like, okay, could it be neurons and synapses misfiring? Maybe. Is it epilepsy? Is it some sort of psychosis? Maybe. But how is that perfect when they haven't studied that ever? And so I asked him, I said, well, are you ever fearful that like something that you cast out will attach itself to you? And he said, no, because power of God and whatever. I said, well, but do you ever experience anything weird? And he said, oh, all the time. And I'm like, really? And he said, well, it's commonplace now for me. I have a small table by the door and I will set, my important papers or my briefcase there, keys, whatever. And I know I have to be at this place at 6, whatever. So I'll go to leave at 5 because it's going to take a while to get there. My stuff's gone. He said, so I used to run around frantically looking for it, but now I know it's just whatever it is messing with me. So I will go in the kitchen, have some coffee or use the restroom, whatever, come back, and it'll be there, but I'm late. I'm going to be late.
Yeah.
You miss planes because of it, missed, being at a lecture or whatever. And it was just kind of no big deal. It was the craziest thing that I've ever heard. And so I watch stuff like this and go, okay, she had some mental issues. I get that. I mean, I feel for people like that. Like you said, it devastates people's lives. But I also come at this from the perspective that we've talked about a lot of times. If you're going to take one kind of crazy thing, you kind of have to be open to looking at all the crazy things. And some of it, I mean, demonic possession's been with us forever. Was that just a crazy person? Maybe. Did they have a mental illness? Maybe. Were they possessed? Maybe.
Yeah.
I totally am open to that being an actual fact. That there's things out there that we don't know, that are not in our control. Is it a parallel universe that somehow they slip in and take over Steve? I don't know.
It would be Steve.
It would absolutely, yes.
It would have to be, because if they did it to me, you guys be like, okay. If it was Steve and he's like, I believe in all this stuff. Okay,
What's going on here?
Body snatcher.
So I would actually like to speak on the topic of mental illness and whatnot with Anneliese's case specifically. We've seen that she stopped the medication. Right?
There's two
varying
different reports.
Yeah, conflicting information
I
there.
actually read a report that she didn't stop until a certain point. One report even actually said, it like varies on what story you're reading, that she never stopped it. Another report said that the parents cut it off.
Yeah.
I mean, it's gone everywhere.
I read one thing that said that it was actually during the exorcisms that they stopped it because it was blocking the ability to get to the demons. So who knows?
One thing I wanted to touch on, it's a little bit personal for me, but you know this, obviously. But when I was a teenager, I struggled immensely with my mental health. And so I went to the doctor and they gave me multiple medications. And then my mother made sure I took them every day. And then once she stopped checking, I started hiding them because I was like, no, this is fake happiness. Or, there was a lot of side effects, a lot of horrible side effects from each one. And so I was like, I don't want to take these anymore. And so I stopped taking them cold turkey, not knowing you can go through withdrawal from depression and anxiety medication. And I had no idea. And it was probably one of the scariest experiences in my whole life, because I felt like nothing was real. And I remember feeling like I was in a dream at all times. There was a haze around everything. It was very odd. And I'd feel like manic one moment, happy, excited, all like gonna do all the things. And then the next moment I'd be having an anxiety attack. And it was just so, the emotional like roller coaster I was on was so intense that anyone looking at me, my mother obviously figured out that I was hiding these things because she was like, what is wrong with you? And I do feel like that could pertain to erratic behavior,
the
that she
peaks
shows,
and the valleys. Yeah.
Especially later on when she stops eating, when she does these things, when all of a sudden she's talking to, what was it, Mary?
Yeah. Mary.
It's like it could just be an episode from withdrawal too.
Yeah.
And obviously the things before, when she was taking the medication, what was the medication that she was on? What was the routine? Did they make sure she was actually getting it at the same time every single day? Because if you take it at different times a day, it can mess with how it goes into your body.
Well, and if you're taking it on an empty stomach,
yes,
I mean, it can be more potent.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, and I think that's, I mean, unless you've been through something like that, or your friend that heard the voices and they were real to him, you don't know. You don't know what it is. From the outside looking in, you go, okay, are they on medication? Are they getting the right medication? Is it a bad mix of medication? Or could there be some that are a percentage fighting actual demons?
Yes. Yeah.
Not just the demons within, but demons from without that are now within.
Yeah.
And that's the part that I struggle with, because I totally get what you're saying,
Mm-hmm.
but then there's that other side where you're like, God, could it be something like that? And I think there's a percentage that it could be.
Yeah, and there is a stark contrast in belief systems.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody wants to be right, which is why I think, when you approach situations like this, approach it with sensitivity instead of needing to be right. I'm not a religious person, but I would sit here and say that there is a lot of stuff we don't understand. We don't grasp a hold of everything in this universe. And there could be something, spirits, demons, however you want to label it, that tortures individuals for fun.
There's a weird story that maybe we would get into at some point, but it used to be that night vision during Vietnam was red.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a story.
For those of you who've never looked through night vision, it's green.
It's green now.
It's green.
And it's green now because in Vietnam, there were gunners on choppers that just randomly started shooting at nothing. In their night vision, in the red, they could see demons. And that's why they switched the color, was because the red would actually go into whatever that parallel universe was, and they could see these things, scared the living hell out of them, so they were firing at them. So are there demons? Maybe. Just like, are there ghosts or aliens? Maybe.
I'd like to hear what Steve has to say on this.
All right, buddy.
The stage is yours.
Well, I don't believe that there are such things as demons per se. I think exorcism totally is a real thing and is legit and works. But I think in some cases it works because if you believe that you are possessed by a demon and you believe that an exorcism can cast that demon out,
right,
then you are susceptible or open to that suggestion. That
like
it
a
can work.
placebo.
A placebo or like a form of therapy.
But I think it's not, and you can't just dismiss and say, oh, well, they had, epilepsy or, seizures, and that's what it was. Because what caused the epilepsy and what caused the seizures, I think there's a lot of stuff in the human mind that we don't know about, let alone understand. And so I think that what we call demonic possession is some sort of mental condition that we don't have any clue what's going on. And I think in some cases, exorcism is the best tool we have to deal with it because we just don't understand what is actually happening.
That is such an interesting take that you took on that, and I did not expect it from you.
Oh my gosh!
You tend to surprise me all the time.
Possessed.
Are you possessed?
Yeah, exactly.
No, I
Well,
think
she
it's
mentioned
interesting though, but that's a great
Yeah.
way of looking at it, where it's like, what if this is something, a condition in the human mind, a psychosis, whatever, that we don't understand, and exorcism is the best tool. And like you said, a lot of people say that if you don't believe in voodoo, the curses won't affect you. But if you do,
Same with hypnosis.
then there you go. And that,
So if you
right,
do not want to be hypnotized, you cannot be hypnotized.
And I've heard hypnotists say that.
Yes.
Where they're, because we used to have one stop by the school a lot. I know a lot of people do, but I watched a girl be convinced that there was a giant hole in the gymnasium. You could not convince her that there was nothing there. I mean, she was terrified. And we're talking terrified in front of the whole school, because you know how kids are in junior high.
Yeah.
You're there to put on a show, right? But they're always shy and awkward at that stage of our lives. No, the fear overtook her. She was convinced. He snapped her out of it quick. And that's where I was like, wow, this hypnosis thing, that's a legit thing.
Yeah.
These guys can manipulate the mind. That same day, another kid volunteered, and he couldn't get him to see anything.
Yeah.
Right.
And so again, that's where I was like, well, he said, only volunteer if you believe this. And he wasn't joking around, man, because he couldn't get that kid to do anything.
Right. Yeah.
When, 2 minutes before, I watched a girl about lose her lunch over a hole in the middle of the ground that just kept getting bigger. So, yeah, there's a lot about the human mind that we don't know.
Yeah, and I think it kind of taps into psychic abilities, tapping into past lives, whatever that piece of the human mind is. I think there's some relationship there.
And I want for our viewers and the people who've been with us for a while, I want to say that yes, I've poo-pooed psychics and the whole remote viewing thing, but the more I look in,
Oh, here it comes.
to these programs,
Say it.
the more I'm convinced that this
Yes.
is a legitimate thing.
Aaron got to you.
It's just, look, when the CIA performed their experiments, there was a certain percentage of success that was needed to continue this funding. And there were quite a few individuals who not only met that mark, but exceeded it.
Mm-hmm.
There is a man, and I forget his name, so you're going to have to look it up, folks, who has won medals because of his remote viewing accuracy and his service to the United States military. The man is celebrated as one of our greatest accomplishments.
I'm going to have to look that up
In
later.
intelligence.
I
I've
think
actually
we should
never
do a
heard that.
remote viewing episode.
And I'm starting to think maybe we should, because
You know what?
it's
I would
pretty
love
great.
that.
It's
Yeah.
pretty great.
When we started that Stargate episode and I started looking into the, Project Stargate and all the remote viewing process that these people would undergo, wow, on the surface level, I was like, yeah, well, good guesser. But then you start learning about some of these individuals who didn't make money off of it, who didn't want to scam anyone, who literally just stepped up, sometimes even involuntarily, and served their country. And they were not just right, they were right.
100%
pinpoint,
accuracy.
holy crap, right.
Right.
Which really blows me away, because some of these people who were pinpoint right are also some of the people who were like, yeah, there's an alien base on the dark side of the moon.
Right.
And they can remote view, and they're like, we are all over Mars, whether you want to admit it or not. There's evidence of people there because I can remote view there. Because once they get the process down, then they can just go where they want, not just in space, but in time. And it's pretty freaking amazing once you get into that. So I just wanted to let everybody know out there that, yeah, I've looked into this and I'm slowly starting to cross the line, buddy. I'm starting to, yeah.
But that's the power of the human mind too, right? I mean, there's parts of it that we don't know anything about, like Steve was saying. I mean, could there be a part that is either susceptible to or has that belief of possession? Because I mean, it's been ingrained when you were little. The Exorcist
We were all scared of
came
monsters,
out,
yeah.
or old Jim Bob down the road there was possessed when he was a kid. I mean, everybody knew about it. Ancient Babylonians. It's been around forever. So maybe it's just your psyche going, "Oh God, I could be susceptible to this," and then the placebo happens, and you're like, "Oh, I'm better now."
Or maybe it is just
Or-
a rare mental disorder that people don't understand yet or can't categorize yet.
But if people can remote view different places, other things could be impacting that.
Yeah, I think the type of possession is an individual experience. Like with this particular case, she was a very traditionally, strongly religious person. And so you can look at that two ways. You can say, well, of course she's going to believe that stuff because that's the stuff she believes. But you could also look at it and say, well, that makes her a target because because that's the kind of person that a demon is going to go after.
An innocent, beautiful young lady who is so devout, just like mocking the Trinity with the three. Now I'm gonna go after one of God's favorites, and I'm gonna torture her in spite of God. So yeah, I could see that as well. Yeah.
So I heard some recordings of her speaking, which I wasn't sure if those were real or not.
Those are real.
And I was like, wow.
Yeah, it's
it gives you the chills, that's for sure.
Yeah.
See,
He's getting the
heebie-jeebies.
Well, go ahead.
And you listen to those and you realize that there were 67 of those that went on for hours. And you think, how exhausting would that be if that was an act you were putting on or something like that?
Yeah, after 67 times and wasting away to virtually
I
flesh
know.
and bone,
That poor baby.
and the torture that this individual underwent.
Well, and
if it was an act, if it
Oh.
was,
you would have
Yeah,
cracked
no.
at like 20.
Yeah,
maybe.
no
God,
one
at the
has
most,
that kind of
right?
perseverance.
Yeah,
At the
yeah.
most.
So that, and again, that kind of leads credence to it, right? Like, okay, I could see like 2 or 3, and then you're like, okay, I'm tired of this. I'm fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this one worked.
Yeah.
And I definitely don't think it was an act at
No,
all.
it was
No.
100%
Yeah.
real for
I-
everyone involved.
I was like, I
absolutely.
do not believe it was faked or anything like
But
that.
the audio and the photos,
Terrifying.
Yes.
the real photos are absolutely horrifying. I sat down last night because I haven't seen this since it came out. I sat down last night. It's like, I don't know, 9:30, 10 o'clock, and I'm like, cue it up. It starts. I'm like, nope. I'm like,
Can't do
ain't
it.
happening. I remember it well
Yes,
enough
that's right.
that we can do this show.
I've got all the
Listen.
takeaways. Yep.
The Exorcism of Emily Rose is a fantastic
Oh.
movie. So
Oh.
I highly suggest watching it for spooky season, which is right now,
Can't
with
do
the
it.
lights off, a candle going.
Started at 3 in the morning. If you really,
You know, there is
wanted to
something.
be ballsy.
Yeah, that'd be
There-
great.
There's something about that 3 a.m. thing in my line of work doing broadcast engineering.
Right.
The time a automation system will fail or a transmitter will just go off the air, 3 a.m. 90% of the time is
Wow.
when it
Really?
happens.
There you go.
Yeah,
No
more often
kidding.
than not, it'll be 3 o'clock in the morning when the big stuff goes wrong.
Wow.
That's incredible.
See?
And see, you've been doing this for how long?
30 years.
30 years.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
we
so
can
if someone's
take his-
I can take your word.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean,
Because
it'll
you're
happen
the one
at-
who's got to get up at 3:05 and get your ass down here.
don't get up
Yeah.
at 3. Don't look.
Don't
Don't
look at the
I was
clock.
telling everybody out there, get rid of your freaking digital alarm clocks and stuff, because from this episode on, you're going to look at that and be like, damn it, I shouldn't have looked at that.
And you know what's funny is I was saying that, man, it happens at 3 o'clock more often than anything else before I even knew about the
3
witching
a.m.
hour and all that
Yeah.
stuff. It's like, man, it seems to happen at 3 o'clock more often than any other time. It'll happen at any time, but the percentage of times where it happens in the 3 a.m. hour is much higher.
Well, and we've got another individual here who kind of helps you with various things. And he was telling me the story the other day where he felt like something was going to go wrong.
Yes.
And so he said it to Steve heading out the door. You know, maybe we should check that generator. I feel bad about this. He said something.
Yeah.
What happened?
It's happened more than once with him, actually. But yeah, the biggest, most obvious example was we were standing out by the generator, and he's like, we should maybe, and it was running, just doing its normal cycling thing. Like, we should maybe check that thing and make sure it's all right. And like 3 seconds after he said that, the radiator starts spewing steam everywhere.
Yeah.
Within
everything
seconds
went
of
wrong.
him saying that.
And you said that's happened more than once.
That's sensitive.
Yeah.
He's
Sensitive,
He's in tune
yeah.
with that stuff.
I think he's
Yeah.
definitely in tune with that stuff. And
So what I'm hearing is we have a bunch of wackos running around.
Well, broadcasting attracts some
Yeah.
mentally
we got quite
unusual
a crew up
people.
here. Yeah.
Yeah, radio in particular, it attracts mentally unusual people.
Maybe it's something about the frequencies, man.
Yes.
It's all those radio
Like
waves. yeah.
moths to a flame.
Uh-huh.
But you know, we put value on our beliefs, and people are so willing to give their lives for these beliefs. They're so willing to devote entire lifetimes to them. Belief can be an extremely powerful thing. It can cause, what seems like a mental illness, or it can cause what seems like demonic possession just because you believe it. But therein lies the value of everything, right? Whether you swear by the Church of Science and Logic, or you swear by the Catholic faith, that's your reality.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it doesn't matter what anybody else says or believes. Your reality is based on your belief. And just a few weeks ago, we talked about simulation theory. We talked about how our minds can set in motion the world around us. And I believe that
Mm-hmm.
wholeheartedly. Yes,
Manifest
you
destiny.
can manifest your own destiny. If you believe enough and you go forward. So if you believe in demons and possession enough, and believe that you have in fact been possessed, then that is as real to you and those around you as anything in the world. Take Ouija boards for example.
I would rather
Absolutely not.
There we go. See,
I
knew this
told-
was coming up. I knew this was
Listen.
coming up.
I told Floyd's daughter, my step baby, I was like, listen, if you and your friends ever bring a Ouija board in this house, I will be moving out.
Yeah, it's
Instantly.
She
I don't
won't deal
care
with it.
what it is.
Do you know how many people claim that they used one and that's where the demon came
Yeah.
from?
Well,
Yes.
yeah, you mentioned.
I mean, in a vast majority
Yeah.
of cases where people are like, either crap's moving around the house and there's ghosts, or they were possessed, or whatever.
And they're selling them at Target. What up with that?
You
It's
mentioned
so
that
icky.
there's the protocol that the church has to rule out all the other possibilities before they will approve an exorcism. And one of the common factors is they very frequently have dabbled in something like that.
Yeah.
Ouija boards or some other thing with
So
the occult.
this is the worst part of this whole thing. My brother's, 5 years older than I am. So he's like 12,
Does
maybe.
he have a Ouija board story?
So
Oh, God, end me.
It's
I can't.
Christmas of all things. And I mean, he just wanted one. Didn't know what the hell it was. It was just like an Egyptian, communication device. Parker Brothers made the goddamn thing.
they're toys.
You don't get it.
Supposedly,
You don't get it.
but he got one. And so he's like, oh, yeah, here's what we do. You put your hands on the planchette or whatever, and it moves around. And we would ding around with that thing here and there.
You were?
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Because he was like, oh, this is a game. I'm like, oh, I'll
It's
play
a
games.
game.
That's
And
what-
then
yeah, exactly.
Then you
Well,
wonder
anyway.
why all this weird shit
So-
happens, too.
But that's the weird part. So I can remember years later, we had a big closet full of games in the basement. Going down there, and I'd open it, and I'd see that thing. I'm like, shit. I'm like, and then you go, okay, well, maybe all of the weird stories that I have, maybe.
Yeah.
They were like, well, he played it a couple of times. Try him. See if he's. I don't know. I really don't know.
But again, who puts the value on that?
Yeah, there are two ways of looking at that.
Right.
You can say, well, it's because they opened Pandora's box by doing that stuff.
Right.
Or you can say that this is the type of person who believes that kind of stuff, and therefore it just kind of all fits in line.
I won't even buy. So there's a big aesthetic about cute little Ouija board things, like a planchette necklace, things like that.
Right.
I won't even buy that.
Yeah.
As cute as I think some of that stuff is, I'm like, I refuse to wear that. I refuse.
Or like the old Ouija
Yeah.
board coffee cup.
Yeah.
Not allowed in the house.
Or a blanket with
Yeah.
it. No, I'm sorry.
None
nothing.
of that is allowed in the
Nothing.
house.
Well, better safe than sorry, for
Yes.
sure.
Right. I watched one video, and I mean, this guy buys his house, and all this crazy crap's going on. I mean, like vases, falling off of shelves and breaking, and books being tossed about, and just all kinds of crazy ghosty stuff, whatever. And he just kind of wrote it off on like, well, maybe, truck going by like we have here shakes the whole building kind of thing. And so he just, wasn't really thinking about it, but started filming. And he goes to remodel the house. And he gets into one of the walls, and there's a Ouija board.
Stop.
And he's like,
Oh God.
I think I'm going to burn it down.
I
I'm like,
I would burn it
I
down.
totally get that, man.
Absolutely. Because the next thing you're going to find behind that is a body or something.
Oh man, it's I don't know. When we were kids, very very young, we would make our own, and all out of paper and construction paper, and it really freaked out the teachers, which is why we did it. But we'd
You
figure
would.
out how to make. Yeah, it was fun. It bothered the piss out of them. So we just make these Ouija boards, and then we play with them outside later. And even then, as a child, I wasn't bought in.
Right.
And as I grew up, that people put this mysticism around these boards. Like, well, so I went on a quest, and I was like, well, where the hell did they come from?
China.
What are they? And they're a product.
They're mass produced.
They're a board
Yeah.
game.
Yeah.
It's a board game.
But all the urban legends
But-
spring up around them, and then
Yes.
people believe them, and then it becomes real because
Or what
people believe it.
better way to build your army of demons and be like, hey, it's just a board game.
And it could have
mass produce them and get them in these kids' hands.
It could have been Hi-Ho Cheerio or the Ouija board. It was like a 50-50 chance.
Hi-Ho Cherry, the little cup that you would put the cherries in. It's just
The demons just attached to it. Yeah. No one's going to look at Candyland the same ever again.
Well, Lord Licorice is a little creepy.
You mean hot? Oh Lord,
Man.
Licorice, my first crush.
My gosh.
Wow, we are learning a lot in this show.
Well, once again, it's all based upon what you choose to believe. And it really is. But the power of belief is really the fuel behind everyone's reality. So this subject comes from our friend Julie, who said, we should really take a look at movies as opposed to the real things that happened. And
especially scary stuff.
especially scary. It's October, absolutely. So I think that's a pretty fun subject. And the more you start to learn about what really happened, you realize producers do exactly what they're paid to do. They Hollywood it up. They make it entertaining. They make it scare you. Always look up the real story. Look up what happened. Because when they put that little thing based on a true story,
it should say loosely.
Well, there's different levels of it.
Yeah,
and then there's inspired by actual events, which is even more removed from
it
reality.
could literally just be a synopsis.
Mhm.
Someone could say, poor girl dies after exorcism. Family believes that she was possessed. The court doesn't.
Right.
Mhm.
Fantastic. That's all I need. Thanks. This is based on a true story. And then you can just go from there. And I'm not saying what they did that with Emily Rose. I think they actually did a pretty good job of, of course they took their Hollywood liberties, which I'm
You
here to
have to.
entertain
I
you,
mean,
right?
Yeah,
That's
you've
the
got to
thing.
make it an entertaining story.
Exactly.
And I think the Conjuring series now is a over $1 billion franchise.
I will tell you,
which
the
is
last
huge.
Conjuring movie was so disappointing because the first two, amazing. I
Yeah.
loved them. And that last one
The Nun
was
didn't
so
hit right. It's,
dramatized. It was unrealistic. Like, at least with the other two, you could get that vibe.
Right.
You were like,
You get
that
little
could have
shaky,
happened.
a haunting in Connecticut
Yeah.
kind of thing,
Oh.
where
See, so
I love that movie
that's
too.
a great one.
I will
Yeah.
make full disclosure. I will not watch freaking scary movies anymore. This one ruined me.
That's the one.
Really?
That did it.
Honest to God.
This is
so
the one
like
that showed-
when whatever, The Ring or the
Mhm.
Yeah, the Ring.
Grudge or whatever those things are. Nope. No freaking interest.
Scary
Was it-
movies
No,
are
I
my
will watch-
favorite genre.
Yeah.
I will watch ghost hunting documentaries. I will watch UFOs. I will watch Bigfoot. I will watch all the crazy stuff. When it comes to like a Hollywood produced movie, like a documentary on something like this, I'll watch. When it comes to some Hollywood produced scary thing, I'm like, hell no.
I will admit as well. Okay, now when I watched this, we were practicing Catholics, so I had this movie with me for a long time because number one, her performance
Oh yeah.
is shockingly good, and on everyone's performance throughout the entire film, they did such a fantastic job, and her contortions are so disturbing.
Right.
And then to learn that was just her, but her ability to contort and twist her face into this
Unnatural,
tortured,
yeah.
it's
See?
yeah, see, it gets to you, but it stays.
I'm gonna go
with you.
home and watch it.
Well, and that's one of the things
Knock
that makes it
yourself
creepy
out.
is because that is being done for real.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so that makes it real because
Right.
people can actually do that.
According to the legend, the director had 2 mock dolls ready to go, thinking, well, we can't put a human body into this contorted state. And she showed up and she's like, oh, I could do that. And supposedly they never used the
She must be
props.
double jointed.
Mm.
It's
du Soleil.
It's pretty damn impressive. I'll say
Yeah.
that. Like, there's some parts where you're like, that doesn't look natural. But, we've all had that one friend who's like, watch me do that.
right.
And you're like, put that back in. Oh, had that joint come out. Oh, God.
Aaron, was that the scariest movie you've ever watched then?
No. So, like, up until this point, like, Nightmare on Elm Street.
But like, which one would
Chucky,
you
whatever.
describe as?
This is the worst.
Okay, that's
This is
the scariest
This
for
one
you.
got you.
The most terrifying movie I've ever seen.
So what about you, Steve? What was the scariest movie you ever watched?
I don't know. I'm not big on scary movies, so probably a Scooby-Doo of some sort.
Hey, Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island. Mwah. That's a masterpiece.
I've seen some legit horror films, Lost Souls and some of that stuff, but I don't know. I couldn't tell you. I don't delve into them very much. So,
What about you?
Hands down, scariest. I would say that the two that stuck with me the most are The Exorcism of Emily Rose and the first Insidious.
Yes.
Oh.
The first Insidious was done so well.
And it's one of those movies you're either not scared of it at all when you watch it, or you're terrified.
Or
I
it
was
gets you,
terrified of
yeah.
Insidious as well, but I was just telling you about this movie the other day. I think the scariest movie I ever watched, because it was the only horror movie that's ever given me nightmares, was Maniac with Elijah Wood.
oh, interesting.
Because it is the point of view of the serial killer. So you are in point of view
Oh.
and you are the serial
That'd be
killer.
Disturbing.
It
right?
was horrifying. And it's the only horror movie that ever gave me nightmares. It's bad.
Wow.
Well, since I think you're kind of bought in. I love you so much. You don't even realize. Seriously though, you're a great big brother, but you get the last word on this one.
Well, I think this one in particular, maybe she clearly had some mental issues that were being treated with medication, but I don't know that we can discount the fact that she may have actually been a target because of her devout religious beliefs. I'm not willing to dispel anybody that's ever said, demons aren't real or they are real and I was possessed. Okay, I get it. But I will tell you, that ruined me. I went into it going, okay, it's based on a true story. I knew of the book. So I was like, yeah, I want to see this. I got it, and I'm like, I wish I had never seen that, because it was so well done and so realistic that you felt like you went through that experience with him.
Mm-hmm.
And it was horrifying. I mean, it was just horrible. And literally, I will not look at a clock when I wake up.
It changed your life.
It changed you.
Literally
Yes.
changed my life. Like, it used to be when I'd have a clock in the room, you wake up and you're like, oh, go to the bathroom, and you might catch a glance at it. No.
Not anymore.
And to the point where it became so obsessive that I'm like, don't look. Shit, it's 3.
Every time.
Back into the bed.
Every time.
Because the covers do protect you.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like a lead
Absolutely.
shield.
Impassable
with
wall.
X-rays.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
So always pull the covers up over your head. But yeah, it was literally life-changing. It was horrific to see what this person went through, whatever it was. But then, you sit and talk to somebody that's done that for a living.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the stories that come out and some of the things that they've witnessed, and you're just like, there's too much there for nothing to really be happening.
Yeah. And this is a priest. He doesn't even need a Bible to swear on.
Right.
Yeah. All right. You've been watching Jackalopes Explore. They're coming for you.
Well,
Feeling cute. Might twist my head around and vomit later.